All right, what's going on everyone, and welcome back. So it's already been a crazy beginning of 2022 for me. So I started this year off by getting my shop painted finally, which was long overdue. And I highly suggest if you're in the same boat and need to paint it as soon as you can, because as soon as you start accumulating a bunch of stuff, it's just more things you have to work around and it's a complete nightmare. So now that I got all that done and painted up, it's time to start to lay this shop out in more of a permanent fashion of where I want it to be moving forward. So I want to make a dedicated sanding and sharpening station that I can actually house my Ridgid oscillating belt sander in. I've had it for years and I've always enjoyed using it, but it's always been a pain to find an area that's free and open for me to set it up and use it. This turns into a nightmare. So this spot's gonna be dedicated, it's gonna be built into it, always ready to go. And I'm gonna house all of its associated, sandpapers and other sanders and all my sharpening for my chisels and my hand plane irons and whatnot. So I've got an area kind of taped off of where I wanna put it, kind of played around with best location to where it's not gonna be in the way of any future tools like my desk collector I'm gonna put in, my joiner that's kind of housed over here. So let's get going. I've got my plans all designed up and I got my plywood. So let's start breaking down the material to get all of our components, build these carcasses.
So I wanted to keep the cost as cheap as possible on this build, so I chose Radiada pine plywood from Home Depot. I used 4 sheets of 3/4 inch and 2 sheets of 1/2 inch, so 6 sheets of plywood total to make this. The first steps here are me breaking down my first 4 sheets of 3/4 inch plywood to build my cabinet carcasses and the worktop itself. I find having either a circular saw with a door board or a track saw to be one of the most invaluable tools in my shop. It makes it a lot easier to break down these larger sheets of plywood to be able to pass them through your table saw if you're a one-man or one-person operation. Also, you'll get into weird scenarios where you have to maybe cross-cut a longer, narrower piece that creates potential safety hazards when running those through your table saw. So I'll break those down into smaller chunks before I finish my cross-cut to the final dimensions on my table saw. Once I had all the components cut out of my 4 sheets of 3/4 inch plywood, I moved on to cutting all the toe kicks out of the cabinet carcass side pieces. So I put together this simple jig to help make all these cuts repeatable.
All right, so I got all the material broke down and cut to size for the cabinet carcasses. I've got all the brace material and then the carcass sides themselves. So I'm gonna drill in all my pocket holes in the braces, and then I'm also going to be drilling in some shelf pin holes. All the carcass sides, aside from the 2 that I've placed back there, those 2 are gonna be for the carcass that's got the series of drawers in it, whereas these, as of now, I'm just gonna do some preliminary holes. That way if I wanna add shelves down the road, I can. Or if I do wanna do drawers and a couple more of these, those shelf pin holes shouldn't get in the way of just mounting a few drawer slides. Real important when you go to lay out your shelf pin holes is make sure to label your carcass pieces, because you don't want them flip-flopping. An example, if you've got a right side here, you want all your holes being on the inside, whereas the left is going to be a mirrored version of that. So you want the left side to be also on the inside. If you get it mixed up, what's going to happen is your holes could be on the outside and not be where they need to be for your shelves. Now all that's left is to screw and glue everything together. So I've got 3 of these stretcher pieces, an upper toe kick, and then a left and a right side for the carcass. Now there's 6 of these carcasses that I'll be making, so let's just get them all glued and screwed up. together and placed loosely in their homes. So you're probably asking yourself, Rob, those look super short, kind of uncomfortable to work on.
Derek, it's just a
I don't want to hear your excuses. The center has to be at least 3 times bigger than this.
So yeah, they kind of are right now. The carcasses are shorter, but the work surface will be up another 7 or 7.5 inches, giving an ultimate height of 34.5 inches, which is the same height as all my other work surfaces in my shop currently. My table saw, my outfeed table, and my hand tool workbench. I'm about 5'8", 5'9", and I find that 34.5 inches is a nice, comfortable work height for me. I get good mechanical leverage when I'm hand planing or chiseling or sanding, whatever it might be, and I'm not hunched over and I don't get sore back. That's kind of my happy height.
Perfect. Your own happy place.
happy place.
Happy place.
So I'll go through, get some door shims, level each cabinet out, fasten them to each other, into the wall, and then we'll start constructing the top. So the top's gonna be kind of not a torsion box, but kind of like a torsion box where I'll have a series of slide out drawers and then just some open cubbies. That way when I'm working and I need to clear a space, I can grab them off the top, quickly store them underneath, and then grab them easily when I'm ready to go back and work on. So that's kind of the model for what I'm going for, is keeping my work surfaces clean and more convenient to work in. And I think that'll help me out.
So building this top consists of a bottom piece, these vertical supports that I'll be pocket screwing to the bottom, and then a top piece that'll be screwed directly through the top and into these vertical support pieces. So my intent was to use this construction adhesive because after I glued the top onto the vertical supports, I was going to come back and remove those screws because I'll be putting laminate and routing in a dado for the T-track. So I thought the construction adhesive would be a better bond with the end grain of the vertical supports to the top. And after doing that, I realized I can just mark out the screws that I put in there so I know where they're all at. So that when I came back and routed the dados in for the T-track, I could avoid hitting those. So in the end, I would have just went with standard wood glue, knowing that I left the screws in place. Next, I ripped an 8-foot 2x4 in half, giving me two 1.5 by 1.5 by 8-foot furring strips, one in which I cut to 4 feet to support the back side, the short side of this workbench to the wall. The other one I left full 8 feet, and that'll be used for the long side of this workbench, being 8 feet. Once the back of the top was secured to the furring strips, I came back and secured the front of the workbench, screwing 1.25" screws through the top of the carcasses and into the top of the workbench itself. Then it was on to nailing and gluing the toe kicks in place, so just using the same door shims I used to level it, put some glue on, and then some brad nails.
All right, so I got the tops all fastened to the carcasses and the tops fastened to the wall with that furring strip I installed. So I can go a couple different ways at this point, but I think what I'm gonna do is get my drawer slides mounted so then I can start breaking down my other sheets of plywood, which will be used to make my drawers. Simple way that I've found to do this, if you don't have a fancy jig, a store-bought jig, is to just use some scrap wood spacers. So once you determine how many drawers you want, you can then determine your spacing to give you a proper, I usually do about 1/8 of an inch gap between each drawer. And then usually my slides are in the center if you're going with a side mount drawer slide. So once you have all that figured, I cut out the appropriate shims that I will just temporarily clamp to the side walls of the carcass, get them leveled up, and then I'll put my slides on, get those secured. And then once you get your first row established, then you can either use the same width spacer if that's what you got figured out, or you can cut individual if they kind of start to vary. So with how these line up, I've got the initial one that's a little thinner, then I'll go to this thicker one, and so on, and just keep stacking to get all 4 drawers installed.
Now cutting up the 2 sheets of 1/2-inch plywood, I'll be making the 6 drawers that this workbench has. So I'm going really basic with these, just strictly using glue and brad nails to make 6 boxes ultimately. And then the 2 upper cubby drawers will have 1.25" holes cut in them for finger pulls. And then the 4 drawers that will go in the cabinet carcasses will have your standard metal drawer pull hardware installed in them. All right, so I lied earlier, these drawers will be spaced by about 1/4 of an inch. So starting with a 1/4 inch piece of MDF, I'll start my first drawer, get it nice and square and level, and then I'll be putting the first 2 screws in the drawer slides and then pulling 2 more 1/4 inch spacers out to repeat the process for all the remaining drawers. Now I'll be installing my drawer fronts, and I'll be using the same drawer spacers that I used, those 1/4 inch spacers. So starting with the bottom drawer, I just put my first drawer front on, throw a couple brad nails to hold it in place, pull the spacers out, and repeat the process for the remaining 3 drawers. Now my drawer fronts overhang my carcass a little bit, so I came back with my router and a flush turn bit and cut all those drawer fronts flush with the carcass itself. Now I'll be installing my drawer pulls, so just using a piece of tape to lay everything out, finding center. I'll pre-drill some holes to accommodate the screws for the pulls. So now I'm just going to countersink a couple holes on the inside of these drawers to make sure my hardware sits, flush. And then just repeat the same process for the remaining drawers. Now I'll just finish off the 2 upper cubby drawers. These don't have drawer pulls. Instead, I just drilled 1.25 inch holes in them for finger pulls. And then I'll be waxing up the cubbies because there won't be drawer slides for these, so this will help the drawers pull out nice and easy.
All right, so now it's time to build the platform in which the sander itself will sit on. So the front of the sander is going to be flush with the work surface here. And by doing that, what will happen if I try to use the tilting deck function on it, the 2 work surfaces are going to interfere with that. So I'm putting it on drawer slides. That way when I want to tilt the deck to sand a different degree angle or whatnot, I can slide the whole sander out, tilt the deck, and not have these work surfaces interfere with that function. I like options. The other thing is I want to make this work surface or this platform that it sits on adjustable, so I can fine tune the top of the sander to be flush with both these work surfaces, so I've got a nice balanced flat surface to work on.
So for the top, I ordered a 48 by 8 foot sheet of laminate, and I was nervous that it was going to be exactly 48 inches wide, and I need to cut this in half to fit my top. So I was actually relieved to find out that it was 49 inches wide. So that gives me about a 1/2 inch of material that I'll have to trim off and help me get this, placed on the work surface. Next, I just cut it down with my track saw, and then I'll be laying it on there just to make sure everything fits nice, and then filling all of my screw holes so that I've got a nice flush surface to apply this to. Now I'll be applying a water-based contact cement and letting that cure for 15 to 20 minutes. I applied it to both the surface and the top. And then I'll come back with some scrap wood to use as spacers to help me align this top before the 2 glue surfaces meet. Because once they meet, it's permanent. You can't really shift it around or slide it around at all. And starting from the center, I'll pull a couple of the spacers out and use my roller to get nice even pressure for the glue surfaces to mate. So like I said, once the stuff touches, it's pretty much a done deal. This gave me about a 1/2 inch material to come back with my router and a flush trim bit to cut it flush to the worktop.
All right, so there you have it. The ultimate sanding workbench is finally complete. So I've been wanting to build this for a long time, and I'm glad I finally made time to do it. It's so nice having a permanent workstation for the sander to be housed in. I don't have to clear a work surface off or use it on the floor. It's got its permanent home and it's always ready to go. So the sander itself sits on a slide out drawer that allows you still to use the tilting deck function on it. It pulls out, locks in place due to the angled sanding that you might need to do. Then you can stow it back into its normal position. The platform is also adjustable, so you can fine tune it to make sure it's level or flush with both your two work surfaces. I put a laminate top on it to give it a harder surface and then to prevent glue from sticking to it if I do glue ups on it in the future. Just kind of more versatile, and I kind of like the look of it. So this bench as sits, it's got 6 drawers, 2 of these upper cubby drawers. My plans actually give you an option to make 4 of those. I just did 2 because I wanted some more material to make these shelves for the other carcasses to give me some more storage options. But these drawers are not on slides, they're just kind of a snug fit. I waxed them up so they slide in and out really nice. I'll keep my medium-sized hand tools in there, you know, like sanders and nail guns and whatnot. Or you could take them out and change the orientation and put them in any of the other open cubbies if that's what you desire to do. So these open cubbies are just nice for a quick storage option. So if you need to clear the work surface for a bigger project, you can grab those tools off and quickly set them in those cubbies, not have to open up a drawer or whatnot to put them away. You can just quickly set them in there and then you can grab them back out super easy. Now these other 4 drawers are just for my smaller consumable items, my sandpaper, sanding pad, wood glue, screws, whatever it might be. So you'll probably ask why I didn't do the lower shelves of these cabinet carcasses, and it was strictly to just save cost. It would have taken an additional sheet of plywood to do that, and I chose to leave it out to keep costs minimal for myself and for anyone else that wants to build these. If you want to build it that way or put those in from the get-go, just buy an extra sheet of plywood and you can do that from the start, or you can actually save the money up front and then do it later on and kind of build it in stages. Just cut out a couple quick side supports to screw into your cabinet sides, and then cut a sheet of plywood to fit in there flush, glue and screw it, and then finish it out. So it just kind of keeps costs down. I used Radiada pine to build this whole bench. I used just 2x4s to trim it out, and then just a homemade paste wax to finish it. The paste wax I use on all my shop furniture. It's easy to touch up or repair, and then glue doesn't like to stick to it, so it's just kind of a nice feature, and I tend to use it on all my stuff. So like I mentioned, I do have a set of highly detailed plans, about 40 pages long. It's got the full material list, tool list, all your cut diagrams, and then step-by-step directions on how to build this exact workbench. So if that's something you're interested in, I've got the link to my Etsy store in my description below where those plans are available. So go check them out if you're interested. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a like and subscribe. It helps us smaller channels kind of get out there and be seen. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.